Most of us have an unhealthy relationship with work and productivity. And a lot of the source of that unhealthy relationship comes from the tons of productivity books out there and the influencers who are pushing out content, constantly talking about being more productive, getting more done, blah, 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 blah. And look, I used to be one of those people. I used to think that the secret to wealth and unlimited happiness was hidden in the habits of high performers, or if I just found the right productivity book that would solve all of my problems. And so I read productivity and self-help and like business-y books. I was obsessed with it. And everybody starts their reading journey somewhere. I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, but most productivity books really do end up being a waste of time. They're a form of entertainment or actually a way to procrastinate more than they actually provide any value. But some of them are really worth their weight in gold. They can have this lasting, meaningful, positive impact on your life. And one of those books is this one, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. It presents a new and very healthy way of looking at our relationship with work that is a good balance between the go, 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 hustle porn-esque productivity influencer and the you should be happy just laying around doing nothing John Gray argument that we covered back in episode 2 on Straw Dogs. This book and the philosophy that it captures, I think, does the best job of explaining how you can be an ambitious, high-performing person without completely losing yourself to it and while still hopefully being happy and being able to have a healthy relationship with time. I absolutely loved it when I read it. I loved getting to revisit it for this episode. And so let's dive in because this book might change your life and it might have some of the exact lessons that you need to hear today. So let's start by talking about what the actual problem is. Why did Burkeman feel it was necessary to write a productivity, not productivity book? He says right in the intro, the real problem isn't our limited time. The problem, or so I hope to convince you, is that we have unwittingly inherited and feel pressured to live by a troublesome set of ideas about how to use our limited time, all of which are pretty much guaranteed to make things worse. Now, this is a really important framing because I think we so often feel like the problem or the struggle that we're having in our work, in our productivity, so to speak, is that we don't have enough time or we don't have the right tactics or the right tools, or there's something missing. There's something that we need to go find, right? We need the right book, we need the right process. But Burkeman's saying something different. He's saying that the problem might actually be a little bit deeper than that. It's not that you haven't found the right solution yet. It's that you shouldn't be looking for a solution at all. The problem is how we think about time and our relationship with time, and not necessarily the limitedness of time itself. He's not going to go all the way to, again, the John Gray, you're going to die anyway, none of this matters, you should be happy just like sitting in a field watching butterflies go by. He's not going there, but what he is going to argue is that we do need to rethink time as a resource, right? That's one of the big ideas we really need to look at more carefully. He points out that one of the interesting issues with our relationship with time is that we do think of it as a resource, something that needs to be saved and spent and properly allocated, but that was not always the case. The medieval farmer simply had no reason to adopt such a bizarre idea in the first place. Workers got up with the sun and slept at dusk, the lengths of their days varying with the seasons. There was no need to think of time as something abstract and separate from life. You milked the cows when they needed milking and harvested the crops when it was harvest time. And anybody who tried to impose an external schedule on any of that, for example, by doing a month's milking in a single day to get it out of the way, or by trying to make the harvest come sooner, would rarely have been considered a lunatic. There was no anxious pressure to get everything done either, because a farmer's work is infinite. There will always be another milking and another harvest, forever. So there's no sense in racing towards some hypothetical moment of completion. And he says that this was apparently called task orientation perspective on time, which is the opposite of what we have today, because the rhythms of life emerge organically from the tasks themselves, rather than from being lined up against an abstract timeline, the approach that has become second nature for us today. And he goes on and explains that you might think that life in that situation moved slowly, but the idea of time moving slowly or quickly wouldn't have made any sense. And it doesn't actually make that much sense if you look at it a little bit more closely, because time is just time. And when you stop thinking about time as these discrete units that you need to pack with as much work as possible or as much stuff as possible, then those ideas of time moving faster or slower kind of fade away. It's a very difficult mental exercise to do, though. They didn't even use terms like minute or hour because they didn't really have any basis in reality. He says that medieval people might speak of a task lasting a miserere while, the approximate time it took to recite Psalm 50, or alternatively, a pissing while, which should require no explanation. So times were based on these things that people roughly knew the duration of, not like units on a clock. And that was really how we thought about time. We didn't think of it as this set of discrete units to be used up. We didn't think, okay, we've got 1,440 of these things to use today. How are we going to use them best? Headed to the farm and milked the cows and ate with our family. And then when the sun went down, we went to bed. There was no like optimization question. But once the clock was introduced and once we started to have this unit-based way of thinking about time, that all changed. Burkeman says, before, time was just the medium at which life unfolded, the stuff that life was made of. Afterward, once time and life had been separated in most people's minds, time became a thing that you used. And it's this shift that serves as the precondition for all the uniquely modern ways in which we struggle with time today. Once time is a resource to be used, you start to feel pressure, whether from external forces or from yourself, to use it well and to berate yourself when you feel you've wasted it. When you're faced with too many demands, it's easy to assume that the only answer must be to make better use of time by becoming more efficient at driving yourself harder or working for longer, as if you were a machine in the Industrial Revolution, instead of asking whether the demands themselves might be unreasonable. And this is such a powerful concept because the way we describe time and the way we think about time very deeply shapes our relationship with it. It's something that's talked about in another great book, Metaphors We Live By. Maybe I'll do an episode on it about how the language that we use shapes our relationship with the world. And Burkeman is really saying that this distinction, this treatment of time as a resource, is the source of so much of our work anxiety. The fundamental problem is that this attitude towards time sets up a rigged game in which it's impossible ever to feel as though you're doing well enough. Instead of simply living our lives as they unfold in time, instead of just being time, you might say, it becomes difficult not to value each moment primarily according to its usefulness for some future goal or for some future oasis of relaxation you hope to reach once your tasks are finally out of the way. And as we know, we keep coming back to this topic, that oasis never appears. It is just always in the distance. And this harkens back to an idea from the Schopenhauer episode, because this attitude towards time, where it needs to be useful, leads to another kind of unhealthy consequence. He says that our days are spent trying to get through tasks in order to get them out of the way, with the result that we live mentally in the future, waiting for when we'll finally get around to what really matters, and worrying in the meantime that we don't measure up, that we might lack the drive or stamina to keep pace with the speed at which life now seems to move. Schopenhauer talked about this in that episode as like living ad interim, right? Where you're always thinking about the next thing or the future thing, and you're not realizing that all of those moments where you're thinking about the future thing, that is your life. You have been living that whole time. And if you're always focused on that future, if you're always living in the future, then you're never actually really living or enjoying your life. And considering people never seem to actually reach that moment of total happiness and relaxation, they end up kind of wasting their life just always fixated on this future that never comes. So then another nasty consequence of that is this obsession with fitting things in. Burkeman says in the book is the more you believe you might succeed in fitting everything in, the more commitments you naturally take on, and the less you feel the need to ask whether each new commitment is truly worth a portion of your time. And so your days inevitably fill with more activities you don't especially value. The more you hurry, the more frustrating it is to encounter tasks or toddlers that might not be hurried. The more compulsively you plan for the future, the more anxious you feel about any remaining uncertainties, of which there will always be plenty. And the more individual sovereignty you achieve over time, the lonelier you get. Now, this last part is, I think, so important because you so often see people fixating on having total freedom, total control over their time. I'm going to be a digital nomad and go live in Bali out of my backpack. And, I don't want kids and I don't even maybe want to get married. I don't want like anything controlling my time. And that is, I think, a very miserable life at the end of the day. Most of the things that make us happy actually require sacrificing some of our freedom over our time. They require us to commit to things and to people. And the more we try to keep our options maximally open, try to keep our time maximally free, the less we're actually committed to anything and the less fulfilled we feel over the long term. It's this sort of escapist stance towards life. Like, I need to get away from everything. I need to get away from anything that could limit my time and that could limit my ability to feel like I can fit everything in that I want to fit in. A lot of happiness comes in recognizing that you won't ever do most of the things that you want to do, or like learn those languages or travel to those countries or develop those skills. And that's okay. The more you try to fit everything in, the more of these commitments you take on, the more overwhelmed you're going to feel, the more anxious you're going to feel. And you're going to feel like you have failed in some way because you didn't succeed at like getting it all done, right? You just weren't productive enough. And so you look for more productivity books and advice and whatever, and it just never works. So the solution that Burkeman seems to be suggesting is that the only way to win is not to play, basically, right? You have to just not try to win the fitting everything in. You have to recognize that you can't, and you almost have to deliberately create more space in your day in order for the right things to get done. Because the other reason that he says we do this is we have this kind of discomfort with our own mortality. And this is another reference to Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. I feel like I've mentioned that enough on this podcast that I should just do an episode on it. I have an old Made You Think podcast episode on it, but Burkeman says that part of this obsession with work and fitting things in and productivity is part of that denial of death. He says what's really morbid is that what most of us do most of the time, instead of confronting our finitude, is to indulge in avoidance and denial, or what Heidegger calls falling. Rather than taking ownership of our lives, we seek out distractions or lose ourselves in busyness and the daily grind so as to forget our real predicament. When you're constantly running around like getting things done, you don't have to confront these tougher questions of life. And some people can't, because they need to just get food on their plate, but a lot of people can. And as soon as they start to, they kind of get scared by the ultimately meaninglessness of our lives. And so they escape from that feeling with this perpetual busyness. And there have been a lot of great versions of this idea. Montaigne talked about it in his essays that I covered last week, where he says that out of a lack of meaning, we obsess over busyness. And we talk about it as if we're doing all these great consequential things, but actually we could just be happy right now if we let those ambitions go and just settled where we were. Schopenhauer talked about this too, about how really the only ways to be happy were to either be able to step back and observe life or to throw yourself into something fully and obsessively. If you're just distracting yourself, then you're not really enjoying life. You're almost like an NPC. I think it's probably how Schopenhauer would put it. He doesn't say it as explicitly in Straw Dogs. He says it in another book of his, Feeling Philosophy, where he's basically like, if you're not comfortable sitting and accepting that what you do doesn't matter, then you actually should get really obsessed with sports or TV or religion or something to like distract you, which is kind of savage, but that was his take on it as well. But this brings us to this important distinction between distraction and relaxation, because sometimes we think we're relaxing when really we're just distracted. This is fun because Burkeman's actually referencing Seneca here too. He says, Seneca, in On the Shortness of Life, came down so hard on his fellow Romans for pursuing political careers they did not really care about, holding elaborate banquets they didn't especially enjoy, or just baking their bodies in the sun. They didn't seem to realize that in succumbing to such diversions, they were squandering the very stuff of existence. Seneca risks sounding like an uptight pleasure hater here, after all what's so bad about a bit of sunbathing. And to be honest, I suspect he probably was. But the crucial point isn't that it's wrong to choose to spend your time relaxing, whether at the beach or on BuzzFeed. It's that the distracted person isn't really choosing at all. Their attention has been commandeered by forces that don't have their highest interests at heart. And this is such an important distinction for the world that we live in today, because prior to, call it, internet smartphone era, if you were working, you were probably working. You might be socializing too, or taking a break to talk to your friends and such. But then when you were home, you're probably reading, spending time with your family. I guess you could be watching TV, but you didn't have these devices or these websites, apps, whatever, that were so good at hijacking your attention and just distracting you for periods of time. And the big distinction here is when you deliberately relax, say when you go sit in the sauna, or you take a long shower, or you get a massage, or anything of that nature, or again, like reading a book, right? Or watching TV, playing a video game, those can all be relaxing things. The important thing is that you choose to do them. You actually have a moment where you say, I am going to go home and play PlayStation for an hour, and that's how I'm going to relax. You might not say it that verbosely, but you have that intention. A distracted person is not even thinking necessarily. Their phone just ends up gliding into their pocket, or their hand ends up gliding into their pocket and pulling out their phone. And suddenly they're on Twitter or Instagram scrolling, and they don't have any memory of deciding to do that. And a distracted person is just having their dopamine system, whatever, hijacked by their devices. They're not actually relaxing. It's not really restorative. They're probably not even enjoying it all that much. They're just looking for something to do. And you wanted to avoid distraction is kind of what Burkeman's getting at. But you do want relaxation. Relaxation is great. We should have more relaxation and idleness, but it should be intentional. It should be something you are choosing to do. And if you do like relaxing with reading like I do, then you should definitely check out Readwise, readwise.io/nat. It is the best reading tool out there. The Readwise Reader is probably my favorite way to read articles online. It's got fantastic built-in highlighting, annotating, everything that you need to remember like the best parts of what you're reading on the internet. And then Readwise can also pull all of your highlights from any digital book reading app you use, like Kindle or iBooks. And you can use the Readwise app to scan in physical highlights if you read physical books like I do. So this honestly makes reading so much more valuable for me because I can so easily find my favorite parts of anything I've read in the past. If I want to share a quotation with a friend or use it in an article, use it for this podcast, absolutely essential if you like to read a lot. So check out readwise.io/nat. I use it every day. And I think once you start using it, you will too. So then Burkeman talks about one of the consequences of this hyper-distracted nature that we live in, both the distracted nature and always fixating on the future, and what we miss when we don't live in the present. And he has this really, really moving passage that I want to share with you just because it's such a powerful reminder. Certainly, it's true that a fast-developing newborn baby makes it especially hard to ignore the fact that life is a succession of transient experiences, valuable in themselves, which you'll miss if you're completely focused on the destination to which you hope they might be leading. But the author and podcast host Sam Harris makes the disturbing observation that the same applies to everything. Our lives, thanks to their finitude, are inevitably full of activities that we're doing for the very last time. Just as there will be a final occasion on which I pick up my son, a thought that appalls me but one that's hard to deny since I surely won't be doing it when he's 30, there will be a last time that you visit your childhood home, or swim in the ocean, or make love, or have a deep conversation with a close friend. Yet usually there will be no way to know in the moment itself that you're doing it for the last time. Harris's point is that we should therefore try to treat every such experience with the reverence we'd show if it were the final instance of it. And indeed, there is a sense in which every moment of life is a last time. It arrives, you'll never get it again, and once it's past, your remaining supply of moments will be one smaller than before. To treat all these moments solely as stepping stones to some future moment is to demonstrate a level of obliviousness to our real situation that would be jaw-dropping if it weren't for the fact that we all do it all the time. And it's so hard not to do this. This is one of the, I think, greatest challenges of living as a human, actually appreciating the moments that we're in and not being fixated on some future that we hope to achieve or that we're waiting to arrive. In Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss, he has this wonderful image of the waiting place, right? Everybody's just waiting for a train to come or a bus to go or a plane to come or the grass to grow or something. If you're constantly waiting, then you're again not realizing that this is your life. Your life is those interim moments. The book is not prescriptive, so to speak, but there are some ways that Burkeman suggests we can try to do a little bit better job of not always having this unhealthy relationship with time. And one of those is by doing a better job of doing things for their own sake. So he says, enjoying leisure for its own sake, which you might have assumed was the whole point of leisure, comes to feel as though One of the sneakier problems with treating time solely as something to be used as well as possible is that we start to experience pressure to use our leisure time productively too. Enjoying leisure for its own sake, which you might have assumed was the whole point of leisure, comes to feel as though it's somehow not quite enough. It begins to feel as though you're failing at life in some indistinct way if you're not treating your time off as an investment in your future. Sometimes this pressure takes the form of explicit argument that you ought to think of your leisure hours as an opportunity to become a better worker. Relax, you'll be more productive, reads the headline of a hugely popular New York Times piece. But a more surreptitious form of this same attitude has also infected your friend, who always seems to be training for a 10K, yet who's apparently incapable of just going for a run. She has convinced herself that running is a meaningful thing to do only insofar as it might lead toward a future accomplishment. And we all do this, right? I know I have a very hard time just exercising for the sake of exercising. It always seems to have to point to achieving something, to some future goal. And it's not really a healthy attitude towards leisure. For most of history, we treated leisure completely differently. Leisure was life's center of gravity, the default state to which work was a sometimes inevitable interruption. Even the onerous lives of medieval English peasants were suffused with leisure. They unfolded according to a calendar that was dominated by religious holidays and saints' days, along with multi-day village festivals known as ales to mark momentous occasions such as marriages and deaths. Some historians claim that the average country dweller in the 16th century would have worked for only about 150 days each year, and while those figures are disputed, nobody doubts that leisure lay near the heart of almost every life. Now, this is a almost impossible to imagine orientation on life, that leisure should be the focus and work should be just like a little interruption whenever it's necessary in order to continue enjoying your leisurely life. But it's kind of powerful if you think about it, right? Like that is your life, right? You should be spending time doing the things you enjoy doing with the people that you love and care about, not to achieve any specific productive goal, but just to enjoy your life. And work should really just be a means to that end. In On Writing by Stephen King, he has this great line where he says he used to have his desk in the very center of his office. And then eventually he realized that he should put his desk off in the corner, I think under the stairs, as a reminder that work was a way of supporting life, not that life was a way of supporting work. Right? It shouldn't be the focus. It should be off in a corner. And that's a really, I think, beautiful analogy and touches on what Burkeman's getting at here. So there's this paradox of true leisure. He says, spending at least some of your leisure time wastefully, focused solely on the pleasure of the experience, is the only way not to waste it. To be truly at leisure, rather than covertly engaged in future-focused self-improvement. In order to most fully inhabit the only life you ever get, you have to refrain from using every spare hour for personal growth. From this perspective, idleness isn't merely forgivable, it's practically an obligation. If the satisfaction of an old man drinking a glass of wine counts for nothing, wrote Simone de Beauvoir, then production and wealth are only hollow myths. They have meaning only if they are capable of being retrieved in individual and living joy. So I do find it, at least for me, very hard to reframe my thinking in this way, but I think it is healthier, right? That leisure should be the center point of life whenever possible, and work should just be this thing that supports it whenever it needs to, whenever you have to go out and accumulate more resources to continue supporting your leisurely life. But to do that, we have to accept that it's okay to spend our way on things that aren't getting us to some other future state. To rest for the sake of rest, to enjoy a lazy hour for its own sake, entails first accepting the fact that this is it, that your days aren't progressing toward a future state of perfectly invulnerable happiness, and that to approach them with such an assumption is systematically to drain our 4,000 weeks of their value. Oh, and I didn't explain this earlier, but the title of the book, 4,000 Weeks, comes from the fact that most people will live about 4,000 weeks. If you assume you'll live to about 80, 52 weeks a year, 4,000 weeks. And so you can kind of think like, okay, if this is one of my 4,000 weeks, do I want to spend this on worrying about or obsessing over some future outcome or getting angry over some email, right? Like, is this worth spending one of my 4,000 weeks on? It's not really that many weeks. It's a great quotation from Thomas Wolfe. We are the sum of all the moments of our lives. All that is ours is in them. We cannot escape it or conceal it. Burkeman says, if we're going to show up for and thus find some enjoyment in our brief time on the planet, we had better show up for it now. He asks at the end, which I think is quite powerful and something that's worth thinking about from time to time. How would you spend your days differently if you didn't care so much about seeing your actions reach fruition? If every moment didn't have to be some instrument for something in the future, if it didn't have to lead to some outcome, how would you spend your time differently? What would you enjoy doing? What hobbies would you pick up? What types of leisure activities would you enjoy that you feel guilty about enjoying now because they don't have that productive element attached to them? It's worth thinking about because we do only get these 4,000 weeks, and we want to make sure that we use them well and that we have a healthy relationship with our work and our time during them. Definitely pick up the book, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Fantastic. Probably my favorite productivity book that I've read. If you're enjoying Nat's Notes, please recommend it to a friend. That is the best way to help the show get out there. If you've already recommended it to a friend, then definitely leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, or like and subscribe on YouTube. There is a video that goes along with this if you're not watching the video, and you might enjoy that as well. So thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next week.